Stephen Concannon, and welcome to Fencing Ireland Sits Down With, a new limited series where I have the pleasure of sitting down with some of the biggest names in Irish fencing to chat about their international fencing experience. Today, I'm talking to Michael Ryan, who attended the 1964 and 68 Olympic Games in Tokyo and Mexico City. Make sure to stay with us to the end of our chat, where I'll ask Michael about his favourite fencing points. Michael, thanks for joining us today.
No, it's a pleasure, Stephen.
It's good to see you. I suppose jumping straight in, how did you first get involved in fencing?
Well, I first got involved really by accident. My health had been bad. My parents thought I might turn into a bookworm. So they asked me what sports I might like to do. And the heroes in the books I'd been reading all were good at sword fighting and also at jiu-jitsu. So I suggested fencing and judo. And my mother brought me down to Fitzwilliam Square, where there was meant to be a fencing club. But when we went to the house, it seemed to be closed. So that was a failure. And I did a 10-week beginner's course in judo. Then I got a bit laid up and I gave up on the judo. And a year later, I was in the garden fighting with my brother, with Bernard, with some dried sticks kind of thing. And she was reading the paper and she said, if you want to do that, why don't you phone this number? And I did. And I went down to a thing called the Associated Arts Academy. And the first evening, the venue was in a model agency in Grafton Street. And I still remember being in the foyer, surrounded by photographs of these extremely nice looking young women and wondering what on earth I was doing there. I was 16 years old.
Okay.
But eventually, Paddy Duffy and Shirley Armstrong came down, and Mike Flavin and his sister Patricia. Mike is a friend of mine still. And I had my first lesson in how to hold a foil. I remember thinking how awkward it was. But that's how I got started anyway.
Okay, and what is it that you think made it stick?
Well, fencing, it's interesting really. I think everybody would like to be good at sword fighting. And once you get involved in it, it becomes very interesting really, because it's about reading what your opponent is up to, understanding how they're thinking, you know, anticipating what they do, and then having the technique to deal with it. And you can kind of work it out. And you have to be fit and so on. Oh, I can go on about it too much, if anything. I was extremely lucky. The coach, Paddy Duffy, we used to know him as the prof. He was extremely talented, an unusual guy. So I started doing it 2 nights a week. I remember I could hardly climb the stairs at home. My legs were so badly affected. I remember pulling myself up by the banisters. And then the following year, I got involved. I was doing more like 4 nights a week, that kind of thing. And, you know, gradually became used to it.
Yeah. So obviously, to have competed in 2 Olympic Games is quite an unusual feat to have achieved. When did you start thinking about the Olympics?
I never did.
Okay.
No. What I wanted to do is to be good at fencing, to be good at sword fighting, to do a good job. I remember sitting in lectures at college in UCD, and the professor of maths would be going on about something, and I'd be thinking about fencing moves.
Okay.
You know, this is, it was quite a distraction really from what I should be doing.
No, that sounds quite good in terms of just, and you're not the first to say it, to focus on just being as strong as you can be and then seeing what happens after that.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you can't tell how things will go, but if you do a good job, if you try to, you know, understand where things are going wrong, understand where things are going right, and then try to get them to go right more often. Yeah. That kind of works out.
And tell us, how did your participation in the 64 games in Tokyo, how did that come about? What was the qualification like for that?
Well, the qualification, I only took up epee really it was around about January of 62, year and a half after I started. But I was training very hard, 4 nights a week, 3 hours a night minimum, really. And I had a kind of knack for épée. So I started winning things at épée. And one thing led to another. And then in 63, in the under-20 World Championships, I got into the last 16, which was a fairly good result by Irish standards. And I was winning everything at home, if I say it myself. And in the quadrangular, I remember winning 13 fights out of 15 and saying to the Scottish coach about the other 2 fights that I should be shot for losing those. And he said, indeed you should. So really at the time, I was kind of winning things at home and not doing too bad in competitions abroad. So I guess the Olympics came up and people put John and myself in, John Roger Hayes and myself in. And we had the privilege of going. It was quite an experience.
Yeah. And I've heard people talk before about, going to Mexico and having kind of altitude problems. With the Tokyo Olympics coming up this summer, was there anything unique about Tokyo?
Well, it was very unusual to find yourself in Japan in those days. I still remember the strange cards, with names like Datsun and Toyota. Never seen them before. And in the street, you'd have people wearing kimonos sometimes and walking on wooden shoes that were kind of just wooden platforms with little ridges under them. We were brought at one stage, the fencing people in Japan, they brought all the fencers to a demonstration of kendo and of using the samurai swords in a wooden pavilion in the grounds of the Imperial Palace. And I always remember that. It was a really nice building, very nice old wood. We were inside and they showed us some kendo. And then there were guys doing movements with samurai swords. And samurai swords are really dangerous. So everybody was quiet while that was going on. At least I was quiet anyway.
That sounds like a pretty unusual experience.
Oh yeah, very much.
And how did you find your performance when you look back on either of the games?
When I look back at it, well, the funny thing is I got into the second round at foil and John got into the second round at épée, and it was meant to be the other way around. And in the foil, I remember in the second round having a few fights. One of the guys I was fighting was a really good fencer from England called Bill Hoskins, and I lost to him, but he went to the trouble afterwards of sort of complimenting me on the way I'd fought. Hoskins got the silver medal in épée. I always remember that fight. He lost to a Russian guy called Kreis, who kept throwing himself at Hoskins and then falling on the ground, and the referee would stop the fight. I'm afraid I'm a nasty person. If somebody wants to lie down in the middle of a fight, fine, but don't stop the fight. However.
Well, it's a tough competition. And it's interesting, I hadn't realized that both yourself and John had kind of, like you said, alternated results almost. How did you find then comparing 64 when you competed by yourself to 68 in Mexico when there was a team?
Well, 68 I did really badly. I think I don't understand why. I was very fit, but nothing I did seemed to work. I remember missing one guy by half an inch. I had him all nicely set up. And I was just, I don't know. I still don't understand it. When I came back a while later, I remember doing well in the competition in England and so on. But somehow or another, nothing would work. But the altitude had nothing to do with it.
Okay.
I can still remember running up a stairs on the outskirts of about 2 stories high. I was in a hurry. And at the top of it, I was heading out, and I realized I wasn't the least out of breath. But we were very fit.
Mm-hmm.
The whole bunch of us. We did a lot of circuit training and running and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, in fencing, if you're not fit, as I know from experience, if you're not fit, what happens is your reflexes go. So it's really important for people who are fencing to get fit.
Outside of fencing, are there any other memories that stand out, maybe from
Oh, I
Mexico?
do. Colin O'Brien and myself, at one stage, we were looking for a place in Mexico City, a museum. We stopped two young ladies to get directions. Obviously, they'd know where the museum was. They said their father was with them. He came along. He realized we were Irish. Oh, I said, "You're Irish." Oh, he said, "I'll show you how to get to the museum, but I want to show you something else. Please wait, we have to finish the shopping. We'll be back in a minute." He came back in his car. Coleman and myself got in. He brought us to this place in Mexico City. I can see it now. It was an old kind of fortress with all these Irish names on the wall, which was really puzzling. And he explained there was a war between Mexico and the United States, 1846. There was an Irish regiment in the American Army. One night during the war, the guys started doing comparisons. Ireland, Mexico, England, United States. And they decided they were on the wrong side in the war. So they changed armies to the losing side.
Wow.
And a lot of them were executed when the American army got down to Mexico City. So this man, he was a senior civil servant. He insisted on bringing Colin and myself home, feeding us, always welcome, giving us presents, and then driving us where we were going, just because we were Irish. And every year in Mexico City, they have a ceremony to honor those guys. They're called the Regiment of St. Patrick.
Okay.
And they have a big ceremony every year about it. A friend of mine, years later, happened to be at one of them.
Wow. Wow. That's quite remarkable. I mean,
it was amazing.
Yeah, yeah. No, there's some fantastic memories. Thinking then about more about fencing beyond the Olympics. When you look back, have you any other kind of memories or competitions or wins that stand out in your memory?
No, the ones I remember are the losses. But there's one win I remember. There's one win I remember where the last time I won the nationals, it was a pure fluke. I hadn't trained for years, but it was 75. It's a long time ago. But there was a system then where you had to go to Brussels to fight the champions of the 8 other European Union countries. And I was way out of training. So, I had no business going there. But anyway, I went. And in the morning, I was lucky enough, I won one fight. As the guy said to me, the guy underestimated me. In the dressing room, he said to me, "I thought you were a rabbit," he said, "but you got me nicely with that last hit." And I did. I still remember the hit. So that was one fight. But the last fight was against this Italian chap who was very fast. Now, this is boring, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
He was very fast. First hit, he got me, no problem. Second one, I got a stop hit in, so it was a double. Now, in fencing, you try to anticipate what your opponent is going to do. So I could tell what he was thinking. He was going to go for doubles. He was as fast as anything. So, I could see what his plan was to go, 2-1, 3-2, 4-3, 5-4, that's it.
Yeah.
But I couldn't do anything until it was 4-3. I could stop him hitting me. I could get the hit any time once I knew what he was going to do. But there was no point making it 3-all because he'd have too much time to take me to pieces because I really was slow. So I had to keep doing the doubles until it was 4-3. And then I did a counter-seized disengage riposte. He gave a little scream, I still remember. I really am a nasty guy, okay? And I still remember. And then somehow or another, he managed to put his wrist on my point for the last hit. So I wasn't last, I was second last. It's not much of an ambition, is it? Not to be last. Never mind.
No, but I mean, I've been at that end of the table on some of those competitions, and again, that's not a position you ever want to find yourself in. No, it's not. It's not great.
Yeah.
But you undersold the fact that you won the national championships again. I think was that your 7th win then?
Yeah, 7 times.
Yeah. which is something quite remarkable in itself. So yeah.
Well, you know, okay, I was very lucky. I had a very good coach. He and I fell out in the end, which was unfortunate, but it's the way it goes. But I had a really good coach, and if I say it myself, I worked at it. I had 4 nights a week, 3 hours a night for years. And the working at it was, circuit training, fitness training, footwork, point control. You got a lesson which left you like a wet rag, and you maybe did one fight, maybe two. But that was not about winning so much as about practicing the moves. Mm-hmm. And I see young people sometimes, because I'm still involved a little bit in the fencing club in DCU, for example, and they come down, they just want to fight. And the whole idea is to beat the other guy. And if you ask them what happened, what did you do? What did the other guy do? They don't know, mm-hmm. which is a bit worrying,
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. Repetition of actions is a pretty core learning experience in it. If you had to go back to your younger self and give you some advice, what do you think that advice would be?
Very hard to know, to tell the truth. I'm not sure I ever listened to advice very much anyway, so it mightn't have been much good. But I'd certainly say, one of the things that would have been nice to do, I think, looking back, is to have traveled to competitions abroad more. Back then, though, traveling was very expensive compared to today. And, but, it's really to have a good plan of competitions that you'll take part in. You have to have some idea of the standard you're at. Are you at the level of getting out at the first round, which you should be? Are you getting into the quarterfinals, the semifinals, the finals? You have to be a bit lucky to win. But if you do the work and you're consistent, you'll consistently get to the finals or somewhere like that. Mm-hmm. And you should be planning competitions, and winning in some ways is a habit. Losing is a habit as well. And so you want to go to competitions and try to get yourself to go ahead and reach the right standards and move up the levels, and not start with some really top of the range competition, where you'd be lucky to get past the second round. Yeah. Start with something where you can have the experience of being up against total strangers in a totally different environment, with maybe the odds stacked slightly against you, and making headway there. Mm-hmm. And then once you start winning a bit, as I say, it's a habit in some ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. Are there any particular kind of styles of fencing that you enjoyed fencing against, or what were your favorite kind of hits to score?
Well, usually, in épée, the rules are very simple. You hit the other person first, you hit them anywhere at all. That's it, more or less. So usually you try to hit people on the arm, mm-hmm. because it's nearer to you. So if you hit them there, so I would put a lot of emphasis on accuracy, on point control. And when you're attacked, normally you move away, but you leave the point out there and you catch the person on the arm. But it takes a lot of practice to be able to do that effectively. On the other hand, you see people and, they think the whole idea is to bounce around a lot, go charging in. Well, that's fine, because you hit them on the arm as they come in. But the kind of fencing I used to enjoy watching, people like the Hungarians, for example, like I remember seeing Nimare winning the Martini, and he had terrific control of the weapon. When the other guy went anywhere near him, the other guy was hit on the arm,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Mike Hoskins was a really nice fencer, and Kulskar, another Hungarian. They were guys, it was a pleasure to watch. You could see they really had a lot of skill and very good timing as well, and so on.
Yeah, no, that's definitely one of the nicer ways to hit in épée is having that wrist there as a closer target. Michael, thank you so much again for joining us today. It's been brilliant chatting to you and hearing about your life and experience in fencing. I'd also like to say a special thank you to Colin Flynn for research and editing, and to Deborah Foley for her instrumental help in setting this up. Thanks to all of our viewers. If you'd like to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to Fencing Ireland. Don't forget you can also find Fencing Ireland on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, or at fencingireland.net. Goodbye.